Hello Knockouts, Tonya Tko here, and we are back with episode number 5 of Goddess Off the Grid. And today we're going to be talking about the aggressive white victim, with the word victim in quotation marks. We're going to be talking about this phenomenon that exists inside of the United States, where a white person will aggress upon a black person just minding their black ass business. And then here comes a white person stepping in their path, trying to block them off, antagonizing them in the parking lot, calling the cops on a 12-year-old, calling the cops on black people leaving their Airbnb, but just overall enacting domestic social terrorism on black people just going about minding their own black ass business. And then here they come with their nonsense. And then once things start to escalate or the police come, then all of a sudden they jump into a flurry of tears and start pretending to be the victim. Or when it blows up on social media, then all of a sudden they turn around, that's not who I am. But it was you when you were terrorizing those people. We've all seen the videos. We saw the video of the Caucasian man following the two girls who were leaving the pool, trying to find out where they lived. I mean, where is this acceptable? We've heard the news reports about the white women who have called the police on 12-year-old boys mowing lawn, or the girls who were leaving an Airbnb, or any number of situations that really don't need police intervention. However, there is an effort to otherize, an effort to enact your dominion over. And there's only certain types of black people that I've seen this happening to. And it's not the type of black people that these people are really afraid of. But this was a topic that struck my curiosity. And I actually announced it thinking that this was going to be something easy to speak about. But the issue is so complex. I spent all of the weekend, all of yesterday, diving in deep, doing research, so much so that the podcast is a little late. So forgive me for not having it up on Monday. Typically, I want to get the podcast out Monday, Wednesday, and Friday so that we can get on a schedule and you all will know when the podcast is coming out. But there was so much research that needed to be done. And there were so many feelings and emotions that came up while doing this research, because this is not something that's in our history or our past. This is something that is happening right now. And in order to discuss why this is happening, we have to peel back many different layers and jump down into the rabbit hole, because we're talking about white supremacy. We have to go way back into when white people once considered themselves, quote unquote, owning black people. And we have to dive into why a person would feel dominion over another human being. And you know what? Listen, I know that there are going to be some people who are going to be like, not all. Because when I announced this on my Facebook page yesterday doing research, it descended into chaos. If you are the type of human being that needs for me to say, quote unquote, not all, in or before or after or during as the precursor and the disclaimer to my content, then my content is not for you. We have adult, intelligent conversations here. And if I don't say all, then there's no reason for you to imply all. However, I understand that this is a touchy topic and people want to separate themselves from that which they see as the issue. And so they say things like, not all, not me. And I'm going to implore that if you are tempted to say that, then you are part of the problem. You're part of the issue right there. And you're one of the people that allow this to perpetuate by, instead of really focusing and looking at what exists in front of all of us, you want to make it personal about you and be like, oh, well, since I don't do it, it's not an issue. However, we do see that it is happening and it is an issue. And this is not a topic that brings me pleasure to speak about. As a matter of fact, this was a very painful topic to look up, because we had to dive back deep into the word of a white woman and what that word has meant throughout the ages in this country, and how many people were killed at the behest of a white woman's fragility and so-called femininity. So like I said, this is a complex issue and we are going to dive into so many different parts of it. I did a lot of research, I have a lot of notes, and this conversation is going to be chock full of a lot of information. So like I said, it's a layered, complex issue. The targeted audience for this particular podcast are Black people and white allies. And when I say white allies, I'm talking about a Caucasian person who is in the fight for what's right, for what's right's sake, without expecting anything from Black people, and without having a pussy or a dick in the fight. And when I say that, I'm talking about the people who believe in the liberation of oppressed people as being the right thing to do. Not because you personally have something to gain or because you want to liberate your children who are biracial, when you know that your biracial children will be placed above Negroid children and that the philanthropy of your wishes in this fight go as far as the resources and favors you can glean, gain, or garner for your own children. And then once you and your children get what it is that you need, the buck stops there. And then you take your biracial children and you jump in and out of this Blackness and then go about your lily white business because your children are good, your children are fine. So that we've shifted the conversation from the liberation of oppressed people to now colorism, so that now if your biracial children are getting what it is that they need and they're recognized as non-threats, then you're good. But meanwhile, other people are dying each and every day. That's not the targeted audience. The targeted audience is a Caucasian American who knows or has the feeling that white privilege does exist and is interested in conversations from Black people about this topic. This conversation is also for Black people who want to dive deeper into this phenomenon and work out your own feelings and get validation for some things that you may have been feeling but didn't know how to quite put your finger on and didn't know how to put it together. And also this conversation will serve as a healing for some people and the trauma that we continue to go through as we continuously and constantly see this in our news cycle. Some parts of this conversation will be biased, and bias is not prejudice. Because prejudice is when you form an opinion without sufficient information, so you prejudge without enough information. And bias is not bigotry, because bigotry is when you're intolerant of a person or closed-minded about a group of people. A bias is simply seeing things through your point of view, seeing things through your bias. This is a conversation from a Black woman who is directly affected by this phenomenon, not just in the news cycle, but throughout my life, the course of my life, as well as the current goings on. So for those of you out there who are artistic or you sew, you know that when fabric is cut on a bias, it's cut at an angle. So yes, there may be some parts of this conversation which are biased because it's coming through my filter. And we're going to keep it real in this conversation. I'm not going to pull any punches, and I'm going to speak exactly as I see it. And this conversation is not racism. Racism is a social construct. A social construct in which there is a bias which enacts laws, governance, socioeconomic disparity, the overall oppression of people, and bigotry, which leads to the overall oppression of people solely based on race. In order to have racism, it must be systemic. It must be something that is enacted and supported by the government and the governmental systems, with key players in place throughout the judicial system and law enforcement and banking and social construct in order to be able to keep certain people in a box simply based on their race. As a single solitary Black woman, I do not have the power by myself to enact racism. Racism is social and is system-wide. Can I be biased? Yes, I can. Every human being has their own types of biases. However, what is the power that this person has over other people? You know, a farmer sitting out in Iowa who is biased or even a bigot or even prejudiced, if that is his personal opinion, listen, we have a right to feel how it is that we choose to feel. Now, if that farmer in Iowa has a judicial job at the courthouse and they're in charge of giving out farming permits and they stop certain people from getting permits because they don't like the way they look or they don't like those people or they don't really get along with them kind, and that kind is based on the color of a person's skin or their socioeconomic status or what language they speak or what religion they practice, then it's problematic. If that farmer in Iowa is a school teacher in charge of teaching children, then it's problematic. If that farmer in Iowa just wants to sit on his porch, chewing on his bacca and spitting in his little canteen and talking about how he don't like them negroes, that's his business. When he goes out and puts on a white sheet and starts now infringing upon the rights of other people, then it becomes somebody else's business. If he decides to then go and join a police force, get himself a license to carry and be an executive of the state, and he uses that bias to impend and impound upon people of a certain race, creed, color, or constituency, then that's a problem. Then that becomes other people's business. But if he just wants to sit on his lowly porch, rocking back and forth in his rocking chair, talking about the niggers, that's a whole different story. You sit there on your porch, buddy. But when you start infiltrating that onto the masses, it becomes an issue, and that's when we speak up about it. There are a lot of deflectors nowadays who feel that a black person speaking up about injustice is quote unquote racism or quote unquote racist, or that's only perpetuating the issue. And these are people who have the privilege to feel so. Martin Luther King said, "For evil to succeed, all it needs is for good men to do nothing." So the people who are talking about they're colorblind, you are not an ally. For the people talking about, I don't see color, racism doesn't exist, I treat everybody equal, you are not an ally. An ally is a person who realizes that there are injustices that exist today. And they, even though they know that they themselves don't enact it, look, you don't have to quote unquote see color. But if you use that ignorance and that bias of not seeing color to allow people to suffer, people in need to suffer. I read this meme on Facebook the other day, and the meme was like, oh, I don't want to, I no longer watch the news. I don't read the newspaper. I turn it off. It's too distressing. My life is better when it's off. They showed that quote, and they showed that that was a quote from pre-World War Germany, where people got tired of seeing the injustices against the Jewish people in the media. So they turned it off. They turned away. They didn't want to look directly at that pain. It was too much. And what ended up happening? In the vacuum of their silence, the concentration camps built up. And the longer they stayed silent, the longer people were unable to enact evils on their own countrymen. So we're going to jump right into this. If you find yourself sensitive to the opinions of other people in situations that differ from your own, then this broadcast is not for you. This conversation is a conversation for the brave. And so we're going to dive into it. Right after the break, I'm going to play you a recording. Remember the woman who accosted the young lady in the Target, where she was, the white woman was reaching over the black girl, invading her space. So a black woman was in Target with her child. A white woman decided that she would reach her body over the black child to get something off of the shelf, nearly knocking the child over. The black mother got up in arms and argued down this woman. And the woman was antagonizing her and goading her. I'm going to play that recording for you because we have a treat. Oh, we have a treat. This is the first woman that we've had after the fact who felt so emboldened by her actions that she decided to come out and create a recording about how she feels about the situation. And then we're going to jump into the aggressive white victim. When you listen to that recording, I want you to listen for the arbitals. And as you know, in the Tonya Tko show, the arbitals are reading between the lines. I'm going to play every bit for you. And I want you to hear the things that she's saying, how she says it, what it is that she expresses. Because this is the launching pad for our discussion today. Because when you hear this, you get to dive into the psyche of a woman who is privileged, but blinded by her own privilege to feel that she is the victim. So we're going to jump into that. I can't wait for you to hear that. Remember to share this podcast with a loved one and consider contributing something monthly to be able to help keep this podcast going. Let your loved ones know that this is a podcast where we learn and we teach and we discuss and we have meaningful conversations about society, about dating, relationships, spirituality, ourselves. This is Goddess Off the Grid. I am a person who lives off of the grid full-time in an RV. However, we talk about many different types of grids, and we talk about unplugging from many different types of matrices, including the ones that exist inside of us. On this podcast, we dive deep into social, personal, spiritual, and relationship issues. I am a life coach, a certified clinical hypnotherapist, and a self-love specialist. I've been helping people love themselves for more than 10 years. I've recently switched over to podcasting, and this is a medium that is more suited to the long-form content that we love to use for teaching and diving deep. So go ahead and share this podcast. Make sure that your loved ones are also listening. Get their points of views. We're going to start creating segments on the different shows. Like on Wednesday, we're going to have a What Would You Do Wednesday, and we're going to have a skit acting out a scenario. But for the time being, I just want you to share this podcast and keep the love going. And when this podcast is up on Apple Podcasts, make sure that you go over and you rate and subscribe, and that you are on my personal mailing list to be able to get the notifications. I'm your host, Tonya Tko from TonyaTko.com. I have a self-love affirmations workbook, which is available on Amazon, as well as hypnotherapeutic MP3s to help you shift your subconscious programming and reattune you to self-love. So if you're ready, I'm ready. So let's go.